Welcome, and thank you for joining me. In this video, we will explore one of the oldest and most difficult questions. Why is there evil and suffering in the world? This question is not just philosophical. It touches the heart of our human experience, challenging our understanding of love, purpose, and the very nature of life itself. Drawing on ideas from my books, What's the Point? And EGOdemic, The Silent Pandemic of Our Minds, I'll share reflections on how ego, duality, and choice shape the world we live in, and what each of us can do to respond. Let's begin. The question, why is there suffering and evil in the world, is deeply linked to two similar questions. Why does the ultimate source of the universe allow suffering and evil? And why does the ultimate source create suffering and evil? Such questions challenge the idea of a perfect world, a world without pain, without harm, and without evil people. It is therefore reasonable to ask, why couldn't we all simply be loving and kind to one another? Why couldn't the world be good and loving without any bad or evil? To begin answering these questions, we must first clarify a few key components and ensure we understand what the issue truly concerns. When we speak of evil in the world, we are not referring to pain or discomfort that arises from actions which, though difficult, are ultimately beneficial to life and the human experience. For example, life-saving surgery or the physical hardship of athletic training. These may be painful, but they serve a purpose aligned with the pursuit of happiness. Likewise, natural disasters such as flash floods or earthquakes, though tragic, are not typically considered evil. Nor are most actions of animals or plants, whose behaviour, as far as we understand, is devoid of conscious malice or malicious intent. Evil, then, is specifically the deliberate threat or use of violence to restrict or deny universally accepted human rights. Rights such as the right to life, freedom of belief, the right to family, and the right not to be unlawfully detained. Though there is no universally agreed definition of evil, much like love, we know it when we see it, hear it, or feel it. Acts such as mass genocide or terrorism are evil, not simply because of their scale, but because they represent a collapse of rational, moral, and proportionate response to wrongdoing. They are acts of dehumanization. Philosophers and thinkers across history have helped us understand why this is so. Immanuel Kant, one of the most influential figures in modern philosophy, argued that to treat persons merely as means to an end, whether to spread fear, to exert power, or to enforce conformity, is to deny their status as moral beings. Genocide and terrorism do exactly this. They instrumentalize human lives, stripping individuals of intrinsic worth. Hannah Arendt, a political theorist, best known for her work on totalitarianism, described the banality of evil. She showed how evil can emerge not only through monstrous hatred, but through cold, bureaucratic processes in which people are reduced to numbers, quotas, or categories to be eliminated. In such systems, dehumanization is not an accident, but a condition for mass violence. Emanuel Levinas, a Jewish philosopher and survivor of the Holocaust, taught that morality begins in the face-to-face encounter in which the vulnerability of the other demands "thou shalt not kill." In dehumanizing their victims, perpetrators refuse to even see their face, thereby denying the very ground of ethical responsibility. Thomas Aquinas, the medieval Christian theologian, developed the principles of just war. Violence, he argued, can only be just if it is proportionate, discriminating, that is, directed at combatants rather than innocents, and ultimately orientated towards peace. Indiscriminate violence, the slaughter of innocents, violates all these principles and so constitutes evil in its purest form. From these perspectives, evil can be recognized in the manner of the killing, the scale of the violence, the absence of any reasonable or just cause. Such acts are born of human intent, often fueled by fear. They are not accidents, but choices. The perpetrators act with disregard for the basic human rights of others. Killing, restraining, or detaining even one person under such conditions is evil. We recognize evil thoughts, words, and deeds when they seek to dehumanize either the victim or the perpetrator. Evil is gratuitous violence for its own sake. It is not self-defense. It is not necessity. It serves no justifiable moral end. Above all, evil is unthinking in any conscious, moral, or loving sense. It is the very opposite of the true purpose of life, which is to find happiness in and through a state of being we call love. Evil is suffering at its most extreme, and it is precisely why we ask, why is there so much suffering in the world? Or even, what's the point? Just as some pain and suffering can serve a purpose, so too the ego plays a role in affirming the distinctiveness of each person. The ego gives voice to the individual's right to be recognized and protected. It helps us say, I have value. I have rights. Yet, left unchecked, the ego also says, my rights are more important than yours. In contrast, love says, we all have equal rights that should be recognized and respected. The pain and suffering in the world arises from an imbalance between these two opposing forces. If an ego-free world is impossible, might a world with less ego be achievable? And if so, why doesn't such a world already exist? Clearly, without ego, fear, coercion, violence, and exploitation would not exist. So why does the ego exist? We know from experience that whereas life, desires happiness, love and connection without exploitation, the ego desires power, control and satisfaction, often at the expense of others. These are opposing energies. Life, as I define in my work, is a selfless energy, external to physical existence, manifested through kindness, empathy, joy, openness, and ultimately love. It is a force for good. The ego is a selfish energy, manifested through fear, thoughtlessness, cruelty, dominance, and destructiveness. It is a force for harm, for suffering, and at its extreme, for evil. The universe is built upon dualities. One cannot exist without the other. For instance, matter and antimatter, inside and outside, beginning and end, up and down, left and right, yes and no, positive and negative. So too, there can be no good without evil, no selflessness without selfishness. These dualities are not just philosophical, they are practical truths, observable in daily life. We each have the capacity to become enlightened by recognizing the dual energies at work in ourselves and in others. The primary goal of our existence is to develop personal awareness of what life truly is, what its ultimate purpose is, what happiness means, how best to seek and find it. With such understanding, individuals can begin the lifelong process of confronting their ego, recognizing it in others, and learning how best to respond. The ultimate source of everything, the creative force behind the universe, did not directly create the man-made suffering and evil we observe. Human egos did that. However, it is fair to say the source created the possibility of both good and evil, and the freedom to choose between them. The source appears to have created a world with two equal and opposite forces, one that gives life, love, and the perpetuation of both, the other that fosters destruction, pain, and oblivion. Given this, we are left with two possible conclusions. Firstly, that suffering exists to push us towards our own destruction, which seems unlikely, since the source also gave us tools to overcome evil. Or secondly, that suffering exists to give meaning to our efforts, that only through effort and struggle can we truly fulfill the purpose of life. The existence of the ego gives life its meaning. Without the ego, love would have no value. Peace would have no cost. Happiness would be guaranteed, not earned. It is the effort to overcome the ego, the inner battle, that gives life its depth, purpose, and spiritual meaning. The starting point for the reduction and erosion of evil in the world starts with us, not others. If we can control the destructive aspects of our own ego, we can do two things. Firstly, we can ensure that we reduce the incidence of selfishness, cruelty, aggression and evil in the world, we are one less contributor. And secondly, we can set an example by what we think, say and do that inspires others to follow, especially our children, family, friends, acquaintances and colleagues. How do we start this process of taking control? By increasing our self-awareness, by regularly and consistently assessing our own thoughts, words and conduct. Our individual opportunity and responsibility is to try and live our life with a view to diminishing and, if possible, eradicating the selfishness within us. From that vantage point, we can then turn to understanding and addressing the selfishness and evil of others. From that vantage point, you'll see that a large number of people are thinking, speaking and acting without self-awareness. Instead, you will understand and hold a clear view of the world as a world of egos, acting out of and responding to egos. To be clear, I am not remotely suggesting that nothing can or should be done to prevent and respond to evil. Evil does not have to be tolerated. Evil should not be tolerated. But evil should not be met with evil. That is why the starting point for the reduction and eradication of evil and hate in the world must come from an equal and opposite power or energy, an equal and opposite state of being, love. To conquer evil, we must first conquer ourselves, and thus equipped, evil in the world can and will be greatly diminished, and ultimately cease to exist. Thank you for watching, and for taking the time to reflect on these ideas with me. Evil and suffering are not abstract concepts, but lived realities, and yet the path towards their reduction begins within each of us. By cultivating self-awareness, by recognizing the pull of the ego, and by deliberately choosing love over fear, we strengthen the possibility of a world where suffering is diminished. If these reflections have offered you something of value, I invite you to continue exploring with me. Subscribe to the channel for further discussions on life's deeper questions, and share your own thoughts in the comments below. Until we meet again, may you remain steadfast in love, awake in awareness, and hopeful for what we can create together.